And that wraps up that debate. Hello, my name is Daniel Park, and this is also KCPR San Luis Obispo. Welcome to the special post-debate show on Mustang News, where we will discuss each of the candidates and how well they did in the debate. With me now is the Secretary of the Cal Poly Democrats, Sebastian Hamerani.
Great to be here, Daniel.
Good to see you too. And the President of the Cal Poly College Republicans, Paul Sullivan.
Great to be here.
All right. To analyze the debate and the candidates, to make absolutely sure that the representatives of the political clubs will have equal time to answer the questions, each of them will be allowed to respond to the questions asked. And I will interrupt if either go over time. But before we begin our show, let's take a quick look at each of the candidates in the order they were presented in the debate. For those of you who missed the debate, these are a recap of the candidates. There are 9 candidates in total. 2 of them were added late. First one is Justin Farid, who is the Vice President of Pro-Band Sports Industries. He is a Republican. Bill Ostrander is a Democrat and the Citizens Congress Director. John Ubersachs, great name, is running as an independent and is a philosopher and scientist from Morro Bay. Cacho Asajian, thank you for that, Sebastian, is a Republican in the California Assemblyman representing the 24th District of California. Salud Carbajal is the Santa Barbara County Supervisor and running as a Democrat. Steve Isaacson is another independent candidate and is an engineer. Matt Kokkonen is a financial planner and is a member of the Republican Party. Helen Schneider is the 2-term Santa Barbara mayor and is running as a Democrat. And Jeff Oshins is a Democrat and a Homeland Security advisor. And those are our candidates. And now, before we delve into the separate topics, I would like to introduce each of these representatives and talk about the overall debate impressions. And with that, we'll be right back after these commercial breaks.
So we're on.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year, 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism, 1 in 68. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
And welcome back from the break. Before we start and we go into the questions that are plaguing this country today, let's start with the overall debate impressions. I believe you won the coin toss in the back, Paul, so let's start with you. What was your overall debate impressions?
Yeah, I think it was great. In the Cal Poly College Republicans, we're looking at all the candidates for the Republican presidential debate, and that's been great because we have a wide range of people in that field as well, and we had a wide range of people here tonight. And I think that was great because we can see a lot of different opinions. Especially Isaacson, Oshins, Ostrander, and Ubersachs had some interesting opinions that you usually don't see on TV or in mainstream politics. And I think that kind of discussion is great. They brought up some interesting policies, maybe not things that people would agree with, but I thought it was interesting.
Okay. And Sebastian, what did you think? What was your overall debate impression?
I think the Democratic Party has some strong candidates for this congressional seat, especially Salud Carbajal and William Ostrander, who definitely did a very good job in tonight's debate. I know that the Cal Poly Democrats will be looking at issues of college affordability, middle-class economics, and environmental protection as some of their key issues when they go to vote in June.
Right. And Paul, before we go into the debates, I wanted to ask you this question. Was there a candidate that you thought stood out? Whether it's Republican or Democrat, was there one candidate that you thought stood out? Or do you think that they were all just kind of molded from the same clay, as it were?
No, I think there was a lot of diversity. I'm not sure who I most favor, but I really thought Ubersax had some interesting opinions. He definitely had a different entire philosophy from most of the other candidates. I'm not sure if I agree with it. It seemed a little out there, but it was really interesting to see his views on these things.
Okay, awesome. And Paul? Sebastian.
Sebastian.
Excuse me. It's been a very long day. Sebastian?
It's been a long day for me too, Daniel. Interesting candidates. I definitely think Jeff Oceans, who's very strong on issues of student loan relief, was presenting some interesting ideas. I think Matt Kekkonen, I don't know I agree all that much with him, but I do think he brought a different voice to the debate and was oftentimes the only person disagreeing with the other candidates on several issues.
Right. Okay, awesome. And now let's get into the main topic. One of the big topics that we discussed, or that we will discuss, and also the 9 candidates discussed as well, is the economy and tax policies. Let's start with you, Sebastian, let's start with you, Paul, in this regard. The economic and tax policies, both of them kind of stuck to political lines. The Republicans, of course, want less taxes so that innovators and industries can kind of grow. Democrats kind of want more tax from the rich so that it can kind of help fund the lower and the middle classes. So let's start with you, Paul. How did you think that the Republican candidates took the economic and tax policies? How well do you think they explained them?
I think they did a fairly good job. Fareed made a really good point with regulations, said that there were 4,000 new regulations this year, and I think that's a major problem for businesses of all sizes. And a lot of these candidates have kind of an anti-big business bent, and that's fair enough. I think one interesting thing is that both the Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party groups really have a large anti-big business and anti-big government problem. And I think it'd be summed up as this. It is possible for large corporations to lobby the government for special treatment. And both sides could probably agree with this. But the big disagreement is how do you actually solve this? And I think a lot of the candidates were saying, especially on the Democrat side, were saying, let's go straight to having a government solution. Let's try to have more government to solve this. But my question is this. If the problem is that there's a big government that you can lobby for power, why is the solution a bigger government? Aren't you giving it more power to have people manipulate? So I think Fareed has a really good point here that we want to get rid of regulations, we want to get government out of doing business, we want to make things free and fair for corporations to do whatever they need to do, and I think that's a great start.
All right, and let me ask that same question to you, Sebastian. Do you think that the Democrats answered the economic and tax policies well? Do you think that they sent their messages to the audience and to potential voters well?
Under President Obama, we've had 68 straight months of job growth. We've seen 12.8 million new jobs. We've had the best job growth in manufacturing since Bill Clinton was president. And I think all the Democratic candidates put forward visions of how we're going to carry that in to 2016 and beyond. Now, I want to respond to something Paul said about regulations. All the Republican candidates did say we have too many regulations, but they didn't talk about what regulations they want to get rid of. There was not a single specific regulation mentioned. And one interesting thing I noticed was Matt Kekkonen saying we have too many regulations, and later on saying we need to clean up the mess that this mining company left in North County, and to clean up that mess using federal money. So I do think there needs to be more explanation on behalf of the Republican Party in that issue.
Right. And do you want to respond to that, Paul?
Yeah, I think that was a problem with the formatting of the debate. I mean, people had 90 seconds to say what they needed to say, and there really wasn't enough time to get into the minutia. That's the problem with these kind of formats is, like some of the candidates say, there's just not enough time to get into the details.
Okay. And would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I could definitely see that being true, although they definitely really need to tighten up that message as they go forward.
Right, right. And first I'd like to extend this question over to Paul. One of the things that one of the candidates said was that the level of high taxes in this country, or high compared to him, is stifling the innovation, is stifling technology, and stifling economic growth. How would you respond to that?
I agree completely. One of the candidates said that our problem isn't a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And there was a lot of talk about the debt, and I think that we really do need to deal with spending and not further stifle corporations in this regard.
Awesome. And let me point that same question over to you, Sebastian. Do you think that the level of high taxes, as this candidate stated, do you think that it is squandering innovation and growth in technologies and in the economy in general?
You know, I think oftentimes we hear about big businesses who get away with paying an effective tax rate of maybe 0%. And I think, we can reform that part of the tax code and then cut taxes for our small businesses and our entrepreneurs. I do want to turn to the issue of the debt. Now, the debt, you can't just look at the debt as its number standing in isolation. You also have to look at the deficit, which is the yearly contribution to the debt from that year's budget. Under President Obama, we've cut the deficit by 2/3. President Obama signed a healthcare law that will further cut our debt by $1.2 trillion over the next decade. So I think he's been very strong on that issue, and it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to do more.
Right. Okay. Paul, would you like to respond to that?
Well, there's more to it than just that, because we have both our debt and then we have all of our unfunded liabilities, which is a huge problem that wasn't even brought up. So our debt, as the candidate said, is about $19 trillion. But in addition to that, we have Social Security, which is insolvent, and as far as unfunded liabilities, that's promises we've made to people but just don't have the money in the future to pay for. That's $25 trillion. And then for Medicare, that's $28 trillion. And Obamacare is adding even more liabilities and expanding Social Security, and it's making this problem worse.
Paul, Sebastian, you're shaking your head. Why is that?
Obamacare is reducing the deficit by $210 billion a year. So to say that it's adding to our unfunded liabilities, I don't see that as being correct. Now, with respect to Social Security and Medicare, these are very important programs for our seniors and for the most vulnerable people in our society. And I hope in a future debate we can listen to how the candidates are going to address that.
Right. Okay. Dang it, I really do want to continue this debate, but we have a commercial, we have a break, so we'll see you back. And before that, I'd like to say that after the break, we will be covering higher education policies as well as the environmental policies. Stay tuned.
We taught him how to hit a baseball, how to hit a receiver, the strike zone, the net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke.
I'm Paul George, and I want you to spot a stroke fast.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911.
Protect the ones you love.
Spot a stroke fast.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. adopt.
And welcome back to the special post-debate show. Now we'll switch gears and turn our attentions to an important issue, which is higher education policy, especially because of the fact that student debt, of course, Bernie Sanders brought it up, Trump also brought it up, very big issue for both parties, trying to get the millennial vote and things of that nature. So because we started with Paul last time, we will start with Sebastian this time. Now, one of the things, interestingly, one of the consensuses that I kind of sensed between both political parties and as well as independents is the fact that they feel that student loan is a problem. Now, of course, how to solve that problem is, of course, different. What did you think? Did you think that the candidates tried to address that clearly and well?
I do. I think we saw two solutions. We saw the Republican solution, which is savings accounts, and we saw the Democratic solution, which is increased grants from the federal government. Now, what I find to be sort of incomplete about the Republican solution is that if a family is maybe not making as much income as they'd like to, they might, even if they are saving, it might not add up to be enough to send their child to college. So while I do think it's a good idea, we do need to look at some of those other Democratic proposals, like increasing Pell Grants and making community colleges free. By the way, making community colleges free, that would only cost about $4 to $6 billion, which when you look at the totality of the federal budget is actually not that large, and I'm sure we could find some place to find that money.
All right, Paul, let me point that question over to you. Do you think that the candidates expressed their desires for how to fix student loan? Do you think they addressed it clearly?
Yes, I think they did. And looking down my list of notes here, everyone's saying the problem's access, not being able to get in, high tuition. So everyone was basically in lockstep on the problem. But again, as you said, the difference is the solutions. And no one seemed to really directly address the problem of cost. People said that it's been rising, but they don't really know how to get it back down again. And I'd say that one of the causes is, in fact, our large student loans programs. You said off camera that you're an economics major, and if you have student loans, that incentivizes people to go to college. And as you know, as demand goes up, so does cost. So I think a lot of what we've seen as far as the increase in price is that people who might not necessarily be able to go to college are saying, well, hey, I've got government-backed loans, I can go, and they're doing something that's bad for them, bad for their futures. They might not be able to cut it, and bad for them financially as well.
All right. Is there anything you wanted to say to that, Sebastian?
I do. I think if there's a student out there who maybe doesn't have the initial funds right now to go to college, but they are academically qualified and that they would do a great job taking their degree and starting a new business, adding to our political discourse, that yes, they should be able to get a federal grant, and our nation would benefit from that.
Okay. And would you like to respond to that, Paul?
Yeah, I'm trying to find in my notes here. One of the candidates said that increased vocational training would be a good thing too, and I think that's something that we really forget to factor into these discussions because it's a great, cheap way for people to get ahead. I'm from Washington State, and there's a really big economy around Boeing factories, and there's a bunch of people that can get cheap educations in welding and make way more money than most people that go out of college. So I think there's an entire area of education that we aren't looking at that could be done cheaply.
Okay, and let me ask another question, because this was really interesting. Now, the Democrats are saying that they want to use the power of the federal government, or rather they want to restructure loans so that students can, first of all, either community colleges make it free, or restructure the student loan debt so that, first of all, they can pay it back. It's not that big of a financial liability on their lives and things of that nature. So Democrats want to use the power of the federal government to help students. The Republicans, from what I was able to take notes of the Republican candidates, they seem to argue that no, more so than trying to help them restructuring loan is important. I think there is compromise on both sides. But also what is also important is the idea of incentives. Now, I think the Republicans definitely used the concept of incentives to kind of help push this kind of student loan debt along. So let me start with you again, Sebastian. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Republican idea of trying to help solve student loan, and also if you would like to include what you got out of the debate from the Republican side of the student loan?
So by incentives, I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to, Daniel. Are you saying sort of the service programs that we heard about, like if you become a teacher, that you can get a reduction in your student loans?
Things of that nature,
okay.
Yes.
I think you heard that on a bipartisan basis. I think Supervisor Carvajal talked about it, Mayor Schneider talked about it, as well as the Republicans. I think it is an area of common ground that if after college you decide that I want to serve my community in some capacity, that yeah, you should be able to maybe get a reduction in your student loan debt as an incentive to do so.
Awesome. And Paul, let me put this question over to you. Do you think that the democratic idea of, what's it called, free community college, first of all, what do you think about that?
I'm not fully convinced, but not necessarily because I'm against it. I just fully haven't thought it through. Community colleges are already fairly cheap, which I guess is, as you said, a reason why it wouldn't be too much to subsidize or to make free. But to be honest, I haven't looked through all the details, and I want to, make sure I keep an open mind about it before making my decision.
Okay, awesome. And another thing that came up, Oshins definitely talked about it, Schneider talked about it as well, is they want to make colleges affordable. I think that was the biggest one. Some also stated that they wanted to make it more available to students. From what you've been let's kind of expand this beyond the candidates. From what you've been hearing on the Republican and the Democratic trail, do you think that your party or your respective political affiliation, do you think that they have a good solution to the problem? We'll start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, I do. I do think the Democrats are very strong on this issue. Supervisor Carbajal talked about he was the first in his family to go to college. And I think Democrats definitely focus on issues like that and are able to present a strong program to help Americans achieve what they want to achieve.
Okay, and what do you think about the Republican plans? Do you have any criticisms, or do you think that the Republicans also have another option to the same path, to the same goal?
Going back to what I said earlier, where the savings accounts may not necessarily lead to a family having enough to send their child to college, I think it's a good idea having those saving accounts, but I do think that the Republicans need to address it on with broader policy options.
Right. And let me point it over to you, Paul. Do you think that your party, the Republicans, do you think that they have a good solution to what is, I think both parties can agree to, is a crippling problem?
Yeah, I think it's fairly solid. As I mentioned before, the big problem is kind of the amount of maybe unnecessary demand. And actually going off of what you're just saying, I think getting funding in other ways is probably something we should look into. One policy that I heard that none of the candidates brought up, but I think is kind of an interesting way to keep our minds open, is an idea of personal equity, which I thought was really interesting and weird, which is basically, you can have equity in companies buying stock, but buying that in a person. So basically, if you're a, talented student, and you might not have the ability to get funding in other ways, you can say, hey, if people are able to pay for my college, I will give them back like a percentage of what I earn for the first couple of years, and encourages people to send the money to people that are the most talented and to be able to get people out working instead of having a huge amount of debt. And it seems like an interesting way of doing it.
And I'll ask the same question I asked Sebastian, which is, do you think that the Democrats also have a valid option in trying to help solve the problem of student loan?
Yeah, it's getting there.
Well, you heard it, ladies and gentlemen. Political compromise. Washington, pay attention to us. And we'll be right back after these breaks.
Race. Love is love.
As an American, it's hard to hear that we have a serious hunger issue in our country. And as a parent, it's even harder to hear that 1 in 5 of our kids struggles with hunger, especially when billions of pounds of good food are wasted every year. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide billions of meals to families in need right in your community. Visit feedingamerica.org to support Feeding America and your local food bank. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
You make me wear my bike helmet.
You taught me never to run with scissors.
And to follow the swimming rules. You tell me to stay away from drugs. To always buckle my seatbelt.
So why do you keep a loaded gun in your drawer?
How safe is that?
You asked them to follow some safety rules. Now they're asking you. In fact, they're counting on you. Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. Remember, always lock it up. Visit ncpc.org.
And welcome back from the break, and let's turn our attention to another important issue facing American politics today, which is the environment. Now, I started with Sebastian on the before the last break, so I will start with you again, Paul. So now let's talk about the environment. I think also too on the environment, with the exception of a couple of candidates, they both kind of fell into what the Republican Democratic Party states that they want to do. From most of the Republicans, I kind of heard that, well, the government should kind of stay out and let America be kind of self-sufficient in terms of energy and things along that nature. I've definitely heard from Carbajal, who states that we should ensure more clean energy so that we don't, this country isn't going to hell in a handbasket. I can say hell, right? All right. So let's start with you, Paul. Let's talk about the environmental policy. Do you think that the candidates presented good options in terms of the environmental policy? Do you think that they sent their messages to their constituents well?
Yeah, I think we saw, again, a good range of different views. And I think the Republicans did a pretty good job of tying this into the water issues that we have in our state. The really interesting thing was all the talks about water issues and how that relates to the environment. And I think desalinization is an interesting point that I've seen brought up by a lot of different candidates. It's something that I'm a little new to learning about, but I think it's something that could really help us if it's done in a way that's cheap and, again, environmentally friendly. I think one of the candidates brought up that, there might be some issues with desalinization, worrying about, whatever impact that might have on the ocean, and, that's fair. I think a great way of kind of prefacing this whole environmental discussion is no one wants to ruin the environment. No one wants to, throw toxic waste everywhere. We all want to have a nice, place to live in the future. And the big question is, how do we go about that? And I think this, as I've said before just now, is we want to do it in a way that's, cost effective, but also, safe for the environment and people.
Okay. Sebastian, let me bring this question over to you. Do you believe that the candidates, both Republican and Democrat, do you think that they presented their ideas well in terms of how they're going to do to help fix the environment, first of all, and second of all, how to protect the environment?
I think we heard a lot of consensus when it came to the water issues the 24th District faces. A lot of candidates called for further research into desalination, which is a very interesting idea. It is somewhat expensive, but I'm sure that with further research, we can find ways to make that a viable option for our community. One thing that I heard the Democrats mention, but the Republicans not so much, is the issue of climate change. This is one of the greatest issues facing our country. It's also one of the greatest business opportunities to come to this country in a long time. We need to make sure that the environment is there for our children and that it's not an obstacle to us developing ourselves economically. So I know that Salud Carbajal mentioned it a few times. I believe Mayor Schneider mentioned it a few times as well. I don't think there wasn't a lot of specifics on that issue, but it was pretty telling who mentioned it and who didn't.
Awesome. Okay, and would you like to respond to that, Paul?
Oh man, what a big and controversial issue. To prevent myself from going off on a giant tangent, I'll just say, let's assume that climate change is real. And I have some misgivings about that. So assuming it's real and it's actually happening, the question is, how do we solve it? Do we do big, expensive, top-down government initiatives in green energy? Maybe. The problem with solar and wind power is the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. And a couple of the candidates brought up Diablo Canyon. And I really think that the best effective and maybe not cheap, but effective and immediate energy solution is nuclear energy. People are driven away from it because nuclear sounds scary, but we have great solutions for it. It is an example of an expensive government program, which I'm not, on the face a fan of, but I think it's one of the rare occasions where the government can actually get good returns on its spending.
And then and to ask a different question, this debate I thought was really interesting in that there was a lot of agreement. There seemed to be a lot more consensus than we experienced in, first of all, Washington, definitely, and certainly in cable news and all those other political factions. Do you think, I'll ask you this question first, Sebastian, do you think that in response to environment, in response to higher education, in response to the economy. Do you think that there is consensus? Do you think that there is common ground for both sides to come together, as we've seen in this debate with both sides of the political aisle?
You know, with the water issue, there definitely was consensus. Again, as Paul and I just discussed, climate change not so much. I'll say that climate change is not controversial to the scientific community, and many Democrats favor what a market-based solution called cap and trade or marketable pollution permits that will allow firms to basically sell how much pollution that they can put into the environment between themselves. Industries that can go green first will do so first, while industries that need more time to do so can purchase those permits from the other firms and have that time.
Right, right.
You say it's market-based, but that's completely artificial. I mean, if there wasn't the government giving out these credits, people would be able to do whatever they needed to do. So yeah, sure, you can trade around the credits, but there's still, an absolute limit to what you can do with them. And I think that's artificially limiting what our economy can do.
Daniel, may I respond?
Of course you may.
So economists, we call pollution, we have a special term for pollution, it's called externality, which is to say that the people who create an externality aren't the ones who pay for it. If there's a factory emitting CO2, the factory's not paying for the CO2, it's the people who are breathing in the CO2, the people who have to pay higher prices for food as a result of the effects of climate change are the ones who end up paying for that CO2. And, cap and trade, marketable pollution permits, those are ideas created by economists to solve that externality.
Right, right. And Paul, do you have something to say to Sebastian's externality argument?
Yep, totally understand it, don't agree with it. I still think that it is not okay to have the government limiting the economy in that way. Pure and simple.
So I think the difference, of course, is we can break down into ideological differences. But do you agree with Paul's claims that this idea of cap and trade is just an artificial kind of illusion of what the marketplace should operate as?
See, externalities are called market failures. This is in introductory econ books.
I think I slept through that class, actually. So.
Us economists, I love the free market. All economists love the free market. We do acknowledge in our introductory econ books that sometimes the market can fail, and when that happens, that is when economists look for government to step in. And taking these programs and reducing the levels of pollution that we have are actually going to give us greater economic benefits in the future. Because if we let climate change go on, our agriculture is going to suffer. We're going to be paying more for food. We're going to be paying more on energy costs when the summers get hotter. And it is very important that we get to work on this issue.
And Paul, you have the last word. Is there anything you'd like to say?
I'm still not convinced that it's the best way of going about this when we can very, maybe not cheaply, but quickly and effectively change over a lot of our power production to nuclear, which has a zero carbon emission.
Okay, and let's quickly shift over, because of course we're always pressed for time here at Mustang News. Let's shift over to political cooperation. And I mentioned this before, there are areas where we certainly have consensus. The candidates also presented there was a lot of times when I saw Democrats agreeing with Republicans, their ideas, and I saw Republicans agreeing with some of the Democrats' ideas. Why do you think, and I kind of want to branch this out to the political debate that we're having in this country right now, why do you think, and I'll ask you this first, Sebastian, why do you think that in this era where I think we have political cooperation, I think we have political consensus on a lot of extremely important issues, why is it that extreme candidates, radical candidates, like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, why are they leading in the polls, do you think?
I think Americans are frustrated with what's been going on these past few years between the two parties. And it's hard to say where exactly this might have all started, but we do know that the two parties have grown apart, and there's various factors that you can look at. For example, gerrymandering of districts, or just the fact that more Americans are simply siding with, or simply becoming more uniform in their beliefs. And I do think the candidates acknowledge that and said that when they get to DC, that they will look at ways to solve that.
Right. Paul?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. If you look at how much voters identify with extremes of political ideologies over the last 20 years, in the beginning there was a lot of room in the middle, but we've really shifted apart. And yeah, that's a problem. It's going to take a lot of maybe social change for people to figure out how to get back to that. Of course, I'd rather we move more towards my side of things, but I think while we try getting there, there's a lot of room for compromise, and even if we don't agree, to be civil about it. Schneider said, even when you disagree, you don't have to be disagreeable, and I think that's a great approach to talking about these things. I mean, especially like you said, a lot of these extreme candidates can be very vitriolic, and that's super entertaining, and I find it really cool, but at the end of the day, maybe it's not the best way to get stuff across.
Right. Would you like to say something to that?
Yeah, I just want to note that the Cal Poly Democrats and Cal Poly Republicans in the past have come together. We've had volleyball and barbecue, and it's been a great time. And I think I'm hearing some laughter from the studio, but it was a great time. And
Where was I?
think
that's what I'd like to know. Where was I?
You'll get an invite next time, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you for that.
But, yeah, we came together, and it was a good time. And I think that's what we need to be doing to bring people together in our political system.
Do you think that what's it called? Congress should just have a giant hot dog party? Do you think that will solve the political issues in this country?
If only it were that simple, right?
So let me ask one more question before I know we have to go to a break. But let me ask this question: the political cooperation. Do you think that, just in all honesty, because every politician says, "Oh, I want to cooperate with the other side," and then as soon as they get to Washington, no, I'm just going to stick to partisan lines. Do you think that these candidates, the ones who at least were kind of moving towards more to the center, do you think they were sincere in their beliefs, or do you think that it was just a political ploy?
Yeah, I do think that they are sincere. All of us have our principles that we want to see enacted in full, but we just have to come away with an understanding that sometimes we're going to take half a loaf instead of the full loaf.
Right. And
yeah, I think they were pretty genuine about it, people on both sides. One interesting facet of the problem is I think they're honest now, but if you have people that have been in Congress for 10, 20 years, they really have gotten entrenched in the way Washington works and have kind of forgotten how to reach across the aisle. And that's why I think this is an interesting election, because we're getting new people in and might get some fresh ideas.
God, I am hungry. First you bring up the idea of the hot dogs, and then you bring up the loaf of bread. I am really, really hungry right now.
I think we have some fatties in the studio, so that's when we're done.
Yeah, I don't think my executive producer is going to let me have any. After the break, we will have more. Stay tuned.
Hey, did you know 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Let's go to the shelterpetproject.org and meet a few who are in a shelter near you. Harlow, oh, she's one great listener who loves to hear all your stories. My kind of cat. Cerulo is a sweet, goofy boy who's eager to please. Sounds just like another dog I know. So go to the shelterpetproject.org, search your local shelters and rescues, and go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you'll go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
And welcome back to the show. We are in the last segment of the show, unfortunately. We will be talking about we already talked about political cooperation, but now we're going to talk about the Q&A portion of the segment, which was actually about Obamacare. I mean, it was supposed to be 25 minutes where it was a bunch of question and answers. It just evolved into one big ball of Obamacare. And I think Obamacare was passed quite a long time ago, compared relatively to today. but it's such a big political issue. And I'll start with you, Paul, because we started with Sebastian last time. The most intense part of the debates happened around Obamacare, especially with Kokkonen and with the more Democratic members of the party. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that not every Republican, but certainly a portion of Republicans are still so angry about Obamacare?
Yeah, it's a big issue for Republicans especially, and I'm no different. I think Kokkonen did bring up some good points. He said that it was promised as, if you like your doctor, you can keep them. We'll get more people on on insurance, your prices won't go up. And a lot of that didn't turn out to happen. So I think, Republicans kind of have a case of, well, I told you so about this. And it was something that I think they felt kind of left out of because, as they were saying at the end of the debate, that, it passed, but no Republicans voted for it. So, I think they feel like they can say, well, hey, we're against this, we're still against this. It's something that we really want to, deal with and see the end of. The practical problems of repealing it is something that I haven't quite figured out if there's a way to do that yet. So it's certainly Republicans are in a tough spot because we still don't want to have it around, but it's difficult now that it's in there to remove it or amend it.
Oh, thank you, Paul. And let's bring that over to you, Sebastian. Why do you think Republicans are still so angry and upset and still fighting Obamacare?
Well, first of all, I want to address something that was said both on the debate stage and here tonight, which is that the ACA passed without Republican votes. It did, in fact, receive Republican votes in the Senate, and it was a bipartisan bill. Again, we heard that it was sort of taken from conservative ideas that were implemented by Governor Romney in Massachusetts. And I do think President Obama was somewhat surprised that it didn't receive more Republican votes at the time. Now, with respect to the anger, I think, this was done in the first year of the Obama presidency, and you don't want to if you're a Republican working with a brand new Democratic president, I don't think you want to hand him a win just right off the bat. So I do think that the reason that there was so much emphasis on that is that it was sort of the first big battle between the Republicans and the new President Obama, and that's why we've heard about it so much in the past few years.
Okay. And Paul, did you have anything to respond to Sebastian?
Yeah, the political battles are a pain. I really don't like that side of politics. If only I could have politics without the politics, it'd be much better. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it. That's what people are still holding grudges. But I think on a policy side, it's still not a good idea. And I'm definitely still with the people that say that it should be amended or gotten rid of.
Okay, let me ask one really quick question because we're running out of time here. I want to ask different questions to both individuals. For you, do you think that were you happy with the result of Obamacare, or were you more kind of inclined towards the what's it called, the one-party system where
one payer?
Yeah, one payer.
Single payer.
Were you? That's the word.
Go.
Single payer. Were you happy with the result, the more or less compromise of Obamacare, or were you aiming for a single payer?
Let me tell you what I know about Obamacare, Daniel. It's brought the rate of inflation in the healthcare industry to its lowest contemporary level. It's brought the uninsurance rate among Americans to its lowest contemporary level. It's made sure that students have more access to healthcare. And I do think those are results to be happy with.
Okay. And let me ask you a different question, Paul. The Republicans, I remember back when they were still fighting over the ACA, Republicans were extremely angry. There was a lot of weird stuff being said about Obamacare. There was going to be death panels, and old people are going to be thrown to their death. Well, they didn't say that, but I'm paraphrasing here. Do you think, looking back now, do you think that Republicans were kind of overblown in their estimation, or do you think that only the crazy part of the party was trying to wing up the controversies and the rumors and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, again, there's a lot of political spin on things, but no, I think that's a valid point. I think rationing is something you might run into, and you see this in Canada where they have national health care. It takes 6 months to get something as easy as minor surgery done, and we see this in a lot of other countries across the world. Yes, it's cheaper for the payers, but again, that comes in increased taxes and not necessarily the best service. You say that cost has leveled off for now in the industry, but when you have price controls, you really do stifle innovation. So in the long term, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting medical innovations not happen, a lot of interesting places where people can cut costs not happen, and in the long term, I think we're missing out on a lot of opportunity for the healthcare industry and services to expand.
Okay, and unfortunately, I have to cut that debate short. That is the end of the live stream show. I'd like to thank both Paul and Sebastian for being here today and for. Oh, that's so nice. And for their insightful comments on today's debate. I'm Daniel Park. You can also catch us. We will also have an extended debate that will be online at mustangnews.net. You can check that. But for now, the live streaming is over. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend. This does not have to be restricted to the candidates, by the way.
I understand.
Who cares? If you can roll back, if you can kind of tell me how much time we have left in my ear, starting from, I think we were under by 15 minutes, right? Okay, it doesn't matter. So we'll have 15 minutes of overtime because honestly, people just want to go home. Yes. Set the clock for 15. Oh, crap. Okay, I want to see fighting in this because we get to be this isn't going to go on live because people will want to the only reason why people watch this video is because people are going to Mustang News to actually watch us. So let's kick ass, okay? 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Let's go. You guys, honestly, it wasn't that bad, was it? No. It's actually, time went by so fast.
It did.
Yeah, and they kept talking on and on and on. Now, thankfully, in this portion of the show, I get to input my own opinions, not on politics. Yes. One shot. Yes. Dude, why is there 100 years behind us? It's how old am I? Really? I'm 100 years old. And welcome to the first ever Mustang News, what's called? What is the thing you youngsters called? Internet exclusive. That's right. No, we'll just keep going. Oh, great. Now you talk to us. Now we have to start over again.
Do we really?
Yeah, because it looks stupid. And welcome back. This is a Mustang News web exclusive. I am back with Paul Hermani and Paul Sullivan. Sebastian, did I call you Paul Hermani?
Yeah.
And welcome back. I guess Charter kind of gave us more time to do more debates, which I guess is great for us. Hello and welcome back to this Mustang News web exclusive. I'm Daniel Park and I am your host and moderator here with Paul Sullivan and Sebastian Hamerani. Yes. Now, let's continue with our debate because we were cut short because politicians, they enjoy talking a long time. So let's go more into, I think, some of the debates that they had that I think more importantly is the debates that they didn't have, which was about a lot of social issues like gun control, certainly a huge topic between Republicans and Democrats. There was also, of course, healthcare, which we kind of cut short because we ran out of time. There's also gay rights and things of that nature. Let's first talk about gun control, because I know none of the politicians talked about it. I tried going on their website, I tried looking it up. There really wasn't any information on the positions on guns, except for maybe Kochen, who is a known Tea Party member, and of course the Tea Party is well known for their support of the Second Amendment. So let me pull it over to you, Paul, because I believe I asked Sebastian the last question, right?
I believe so.
Yes. Okay. I want to be absolutely fair. So let me ask you this, Paul. The political discourse that is going on around the Second Amendment and the NRA and gun control in general, what do you think of it? What are your general thoughts and feelings about that?
Yeah, as we were saying towards the end of the live segment, a lot of that, as with a lot of issues, is caught up in political fog, and a lot of the facts, I think, are lost. One interesting detail that you see Obama and Democrats bring up again and again is the gun show loophole. They say, aha, a lot of these criminals are going to gun shows and getting guns without background checks, and that's a lot of the problem. Well, it turns out that if you go to gun shows, you do need background checks. It's the same paperwork as if you go to an actual store. And a lot of the people that, a lot of the weapons that are used in homicides don't even come from gun shows. It's something like a third are illegal, another third are from family members and friends, and the rest are bought legally, from gun shows or elsewhere. Not 100% on the statistics, but that's generally how it breaks down. So I think the thrust of gun control is you're trying to, make guns illegal, and that is what's, that's going to lead them to go away. Or it's gonna prevent people from using them, right? And that's worked so well for things like illegal drugs and marijuana. They're banned and now no one uses weed. Obviously that's not the case, and it's not gonna work with guns either. Right. Criminals will find a way to get weapons to use in murder.
Sebastian?
Well, I want to begin by noting that gun control does have special relevance to the 24th District, given to the tragedy that we saw in Santa Barbara a few years ago, and I'm sure that the candidates will be addressing it in the future. To begin on the issue of the gun show loophole, when I was doing some research onto the president's recent executive order on guns, what happened with the gun shows is that some of the sellers there were required to do background checks, others were not, and his executive order did seek to refine those distinctions between who had to and who did not at gun shows. Second of all, when you look at gun control abroad, for example, Australia, you see that by enacting some common sense reforms, that they're able to vastly decrease the amount of gun violence that they have.
Right. Do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, another example of gun control is in England. I believe they banned them back in the 60s or so. And for a while, murder rates stayed constant. They didn't go up, they stayed about the same, great. And then there was a huge spike in the 80s and 90s while there was a gun ban in effect. So the logic would be if we have a gun ban, you're not going to have these murder rates because people can't get access to guns, but it still happened. The problem is people are going to be jerks and people are going to be murderers, and you can't change human nature. If you ban guns, they're going to find knives to kill people with. So I think it's really approaching the issue from the wrong side of things. And you mentioned UCSB killer, and a lot of these mass shooters, who by the way are statistical anomalies, are mentally ill people. And I think focusing on mental health is a really great way to deal with this.
Right. Do you, Paul, excuse me, Sebastian, I keep getting these names wrong. Sebastian, do you think that the Republican answer is that, well, our mental health care system is completely whack, it's just completely degenerated, they're getting access to all these guns, and they're the ones that are committing these mass murders? Is that answer sufficient to you, and do you think to a majority of Democrats in general?
I want to begin by just going back to some of the things that Paul said. I don't think the majority of Democrats want to take people's guns away. We just want to see that people who are criminals do not have guns. And with respect to the issues in England, if people who are inclined to commit murders do not have guns, they will not be as murderous as they are with, a knife, for instance.
I'm not sure if the statistics support that, dude. And it's one of those things that's kind of hard to talk in this format. It'd be nice to have a bunch of charts and graphs, but let's suffice it to say it's a very complicated statistical issue, and there actually seems to be very little correlation between the number of guns and the number of murder rates, which was really surprising. You'd expect it to be one way or the other. It's basically flat. So really, it's not the issue. The issue is these social things that we need to address in other ways.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the topic that also is extremely big among Republicans and Democrats, which is the concept of immigration. Immigration, of course, a huge issue that, unfortunately, in the 2 hours that they were given, they really didn't talk about immigration at all, even though as congressmen or women, they will be forced to deal with the situation. It will be left at their doorstep. So let me move it over. I believe you answered first, right, Sebastian? So we will bring this question over to Paul. Paul, first of all, what is the Republican stance on immigration, and do you think that the Democratic stance of immigration is adequate?
Well, even within the Republican Party, there's a wide range of different stances. Everything from Trump's "let's build a wall" to amnesty to various other reforms. And I think what people like about Trump is that he's very blunt about issues. This is, again, a super complicated issue, and he just boils it down to wall, screw it. And I think there's a lot more subtleties to it. But let's start with this. If you don't stop people coming into your company or your country, you're still going to have to deal with all the problems that occur there. So I think doing something to stem the tide is a great start. Be that a wall or changing incentives, I think you can start, reversing the tide there. And by changing incentives, I mean there are ways for illegal immigrants to get all sorts of social benefits. And I think that's something they should not have access to.
Right. Sebastian, let me bring this question over to you. Are you happy with, first of all, what is the Democrats' stance on immigration, just for the folks at home who don't really know that much? And do you believe that the Republican answer is sufficient?
I think the Democratic stance on immigration is that if you're someone who's a striver, who wants to work hard, you should be able to come to the United States and, apply yourself towards achieving the American dream. I want to address some of the things that Paul said about immigration. First of all, there is no tide on the southern border. There was a net zero population change across the border in 2014, which is my understanding. The population of undocumented immigrants in the United States has actually been falling since 2008, and the people who are coming into the United States with undocumented status are largely fleeing political violence in Central America, and I'm not sure what other choice they might have had.
Right. Do you want to respond to that, Paul?
Yeah, so on your first point, I absolutely agree that people should be able to come here. The old cliche is America is built on immigrants, and I still believe that that's the case. There's people out there that want to come to America that are more American than people here, as far as wanting to start a business and run their lives and all these great things. But if the first thing you do when you come to this country is break a law, I'm not sure if I trust your dedication to American values. If this comes in the form of some things that people are proposing with increasing legal immigration, maybe there's something to that there, but I still am not fully trusting these people.
So with respect to the law issue, being undocumented in the United States is not actually a crime. There is no law in the United States that says you cannot be here undocumented. It's actually a civil regulation, and I know how much you hate regulations, Paul. And so when you look at the statistics related to undocumented immigrants, they're statistically less likely to commit crimes than the general population. And with respect to the issue of social benefits, undocumented workers have put in $300 billion to the Social Security Trust Fund. They have hardly withdrawn anything else from that fund. So to say that they're coming here to take our welfare, I don't see that as being true or valid.
Well, hold on. Of course they wouldn't have taken anything from Social Security. They're all fairly young. They might be taking from other benefits and haven't retired yet. Mm-hmm. I don't see that as something that you wouldn't expect.
Do you have any statistics related to how much benefits undocumented immigrants might have taken?
Not offhand, but I'm sure it's up there.
Right.
What is up there?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, something to look into for the people at home. Go on Google. Let's find out.
Right. Yes, and immigration, it is certainly a big political topic in this country today. And I want to bring this over to the Republican side first before moving into the Democratic side. I'll ask both of you this question very quickly. Donald Trump, Of course, everyone loves Donald Trump.
Not really.
Donald Trump has been able to, every single time, it's a very interesting political anomaly. He says very inflammatory things, extremely offensive things, and yet his poll numbers rise. Why do you think that is, Paul?
So I think people give Trump too little credit. Everyone's saying, he's going off the cuff, he's crazy and evil and whatever. I think he's playing all of us. I think it's a very calculated plan. People say he's stupid, but the man's very intelligent, and he knows how the media works. He's spent, all of his life in, marketing and entertainment, and politics is the biggest entertainment show of, in America. So clearly he knows how the media works. He's spinning it and, spinning up controversy because he knows it's going to get him attention, and it's working. Does that necessarily mean it's, his policies are any good? That's something we can hash out later.
And Sebastian, why do you think every single time Trump says something inflammatory, offensive, things that if Jeb Bush, or if Hillary Clinton said, would absolutely tank their numbers? Why is it rising for Trump?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that a few days ago, the people of Iowa showed that they weren't very impressed with Mr. Trump's marketing skills, and I do want to congratulate them on sending that message. With respect to people who like Mr. Trump, I do think President Obama has worked very hard to improve the economic conditions in this country, and he has done so. But there is more work to be done, especially with raising the incomes of the middle class that I think Democratic candidates will be working on in 2016. But I think a lot of those people who maybe have not felt the recovery yet are upset. And Mr. Trump does give them a very easy way to find blame for why their hard work has yet to be rewarded.
Okay, and this is going to be a lightning round question. We're running out of time here, I've been told. Let's start with you this time, Sebastian. This will be the last question for the web exclusive. Now we talked about Trump. Let's talk about the other political contender, which is Bernie Sanders. Now, I remember the polls back when Bernie Sanders first initially decided to run. The polls for every political pundit out there said he doesn't have a chance in hell. There's just no chance he's going to make it. And then what happens? He's three or six votes behind Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton won by 6 coin tosses. I mean, could you possibly imagine now, here in January 2016, that Sanders would be so close to Hillary Clinton? And why do you think that is?
I had no way of predicting that Senator Sanders would be where he is today. No one else could have. I do think, again, Senator Sanders speaks to the frustrations of Americans, and of course he does so in a very different way than Mr. Trump does. And he says that we need a political revolution in this country, that we need to refine our institutions, or in some ways change them out, or completely change them. And if he is elected president, I don't see him being able to do that, simply because the presidency is very constrained by the outside political factors it faces. If Bernie Sanders wants to accomplish what he wants to, not only would he need to be president, there need to be 100 Bernie Sanders in Congress.
Right. I'm sorry, Sebastian. I really have to cut you off to get Paul in. Paul, let me ask you that question about Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I think another reason why he's done well is that he seems so sincere. I will say, he looks like a sincere guy. I think he genuinely believes what he's saying. I think what he's saying is nuts, but I think that sincerity is something that you don't often see in politics, especially in comparison to Hillary Clinton.
Right. Well, I mean, I just really enjoyed both candidates. I think that they're both very entertaining. They've been able to cuss their way out in the campaign trail, which I enjoy. Speaking of cussing, one of the candidates said
Mr. Oceans.
Yes, he said a word that rhymes with hitch and G-damn, which I thought was quite entertaining, but we actually were airing that live on KCBR, so that was not good. I hope the FCC does not, please, Mr. FCC, we didn't do anything wrong. I beg of you. And that pretty much wraps it up. I wish we had more. Do you guys have another 8 hours? Yes. Well, that is it for the web exclusive. Check out Mustang News for more info on the political issues facing this country today. Thank you for watching.